Today, we're diving into one of history's most durable civilizations, the Anuradhapura Kingdom of Sri Lanka. We're talking about a city that wasn't just a capital, but the absolute beating heart of a nation for an almost unbelievable stretch of time. And that really gets you to the central question, right? How is that even possible? How does a single city, one political center, manage to stay on top for 14 centuries? It's a staggering thought. And the answer is really what this whole explainer is about. The answer isn't just luck. This didn't happen by accident. It was a deliberate plan, a kind of blueprint for a society that was built on three powerful interconnected pillars: absolutely revolutionary water engineering, a profound new faith, and some truly monumental architecture. So let's start by just getting a handle on the sheer scale of what they accomplished. To really wrap our heads around this kingdom, we have to start with its sheer, almost mind-boggling longevity. Yep, you heard that right. For roughly 1,400 years, from the 4th century BCE all the way to the 11th century CE, Anuradhapura was the capital. Just to put that in perspective for you, that's longer than the Roman Empire existed, and I mean both the western and the eastern halves combined. It's just an epic timeline, which makes you ask, okay, how on earth did it all begin? So how did a kingdom like this get started? Well, the official story is a classic founding myth. But as we're about to see, the real story, the one buried in the soil, is actually way older and a lot more complex. Okay, so the myth, the one that comes from the great historical chronicles, tells the story of an exiled Indian prince named Vijaya, who shows up and basically founds a civilization. But the archaeology tells a completely different story. The evidence on the ground shows a pretty sophisticated city was already there, and not just there, but thriving almost 400 years before this prince supposedly even set sail. And we're not talking about some primitive village here. The people in this pre-existing city had advanced iron tools. They were systematically growing rice in paddy fields. They were actively trading with India for things like goods and horses. They were even making sophisticated pottery and roof tiles. I mean, this was a complex, fully formed society. So if Prince Vijaya wasn't the guy who started it all, who was? Well, the real credit for turning this ancient city into a true organized state really belongs to this man, King Pandukabhaya, back in the 4th century BCE. He wasn't the founder of the settlement, but you could definitely call him the architect of the kingdom. And he had this brilliant three-part plan. First, he created a formal government structure by actually drawing out village boundaries across the whole island. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, he took control of the most vital resource there is: water. He did this by building the kingdom's first major reservoirs. And third, he organized the capital city itself, laying it out with proper urban planning and sanitation. This was the blueprint for power that would last for over 1,000 years. Now, with that solid foundation in place, two new elements came into the picture that would take this kingdom from just a regional power to a true great civilization: a new religion and an unparalleled mastery over water. So, in the 3rd century BCE, under a king named Devanampiya Tissa, Buddhism arrived from India. And this wasn't some quiet, gradual conversion. No, this was a full-blown cultural revolution. It became the official state religion. Suddenly, the king's main job was to be the protector of the faith. And this new identity kicked off an incredible era of building massive, monumental religious structures. At the very same time, they were perfecting their other source of power: managing water. They developed this incredible thing called the tank cascade system. Now, forget what you might picture with a few big dams. This was a network of thousands of small, interconnected village reservoirs. They called them tanks, that all worked together in a truly genius way. The principle behind it was simple, but absolutely brilliant. Each small tank would capture the monsoon rains. When one filled up, its overflow didn't just cause a flood. Nope, it was designed to simply flow downhill and fill the next tank in the chain, which would then fill the next, and so on. This amazing system let them control floods, store huge amounts of water, and irrigate enough farmland to support a massive population, even in a pretty dry climate. But to go from these small village tanks to truly massive reservoirs, they had to solve a huge engineering problem: the immense water pressure at the bottom of a large earthen dam, which could just burst it open. Their solution was an invention called the Basokatua.
You can think of it like a sophisticated valve pit or a sluice gate that's built right into the dam wall. It allowed them to safely release water under pressure in a controlled way. And this was a technological breakthrough that unlocked their ability to build on a colossal scale.
So, what do you do with the incredible wealth generated by this hydraulic system, combined with the spiritual drive from your new faith? Well, the kings of Anuradhapura began to build, and man, did they build big. This quote from our source material just captures the feeling of the city perfectly. It wasn't just a random collection of buildings. This was a carefully planned metropolis, a sacred city dominated by structures on a truly giant scale. And this great city wasn't built overnight. It happened over centuries, really driven by a line of visionary rulers. You have Pandukabhaya, the guy who builds the state, then Divanampiatissa, who brings in Buddhism. After him, Duthukamuno, who unifies the entire nation. And then Mahasena, the absolute master of reservoir building. Each one added a critical layer to the kingdom's foundation. To really get a sense of the scale they were working on, just listen to these numbers for the Jetavanaramaya stupa built by King Mahasena. At 400 feet tall, it was the third tallest structure in the entire ancient world. The only things taller were the two Great Pyramids at Giza. And get this, with over 93 million bricks, it is still the largest brick structure ever built. Ever. And their engineering precision was just as impressive as their scale. Take the Yoda Ila, or the Giant Canal. It stretched for 54 miles. But here's the part that'll blow your mind. It was built with a gradient of only about 6 inches per mile. That's an almost perfectly flat channel of water. I mean, that is a feat of surveying that is incredibly difficult to pull off even with modern laser technology. So, with all this power, all this wealth, and all this ingenuity, why did it end? Why didn't it last forever? Well, like all great empires, Anuradhapura eventually came up against a combination of forces that even its brilliant blueprint couldn't withstand. Ultimately, the kingdom just crumbled from both the inside and the outside. Internally, there was constant fighting over who should be king, and they became fatally reliant on foreign mercenaries, which just eroded the state's authority. This weakness created the perfect opening for a powerful enemy on the outside, the Chola Empire from South India, which invaded and, in 1017 CE, delivered the final blow. They sacked the city, and its 1,400-year reign was over. But here's the amazing thing. The fall of the city wasn't the end of its influence, not by a long shot. The blueprint it created, that endured. Theravada Buddhism is still a central pillar of Sri Lankan identity. Many of those ancient reservoirs and hydraulic systems are still being used today. Its art and architecture define the nation's classical heritage. And that idea of a unified island, first achieved by Duthukamuno, it remains a powerful political concept to this day. And all of this leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The story of Anuradhapura shows us how a really well-designed blueprint for a society can lead to incredible longevity and amazing achievements. Which kind of makes you wonder, as we look at our own world today, what parts of an ancient blueprint for sustainable living, for social cohesion, for long-term thinking, are worth preserving?